New Landing's Job Chat is brought to you in part by the Prosperity Advisory Group, the next step in your financial future. And by the EBS Group, with an unparalleled background in Oracle solutions and services.
Dating and courtship can be exciting and it can be frustrating. How does that relate to job searching and employment? You'll find out today on Job Chat. Your hosts are Hector Silva and
Sarah Kane.
Our guest today is Mark Naster.
Mark has over 35 years of experience in dealing with people-related business issues. He has seen all sides of the for-profit world and has worked in a variety of industries and businesses. His extensive experience in staffing has given him tremendous insight into the hiring process, the good, the bad, and definitely the ugly. During the course of his career, he has worked for Ross Perot, Ewing Kaufman, and Lamar Hunt. He is now devoting himself full-time to helping people less fortunate than himself by working with Heartland Habitat for Humanity. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Welcome. Mark, great analogy that you have here, but in what ways is courtship, a model for job searching?
Well, it all started, Hector, real quickly, when I had been in the corporate world and the staffing component for many, many years. And as I was training my recruiters, one of the things we talked about is that the relationship, the employment relationship, is very much like a marriage. And the whole process of starting that whole marriage is through the courtship process. And as I've worked with organizations and helped people try and find jobs, the thing that people could relate to, they're being told how they should conduct their job search. Well, most of us have all gone through a courtship. Some successful, some unsuccessful. But we understand it, and we can relate to it. And so the point is to give people, instead of thinking it's a game, which they're being taught how to play the game by working with employers, and you got to do this and you got to do that. We all have been through a courtship. And in looking at the analogy of the process, it's identical to the employment process. And that's where this all came about. So it becomes, what are you looking for? Once you find it, how do you get introduced to them? Then once you get introduced to them, you can't get married till you go on a date unless you're in certain family backgrounds and they've set it up for you. But reality is you don't get married till you go on the date. And then once you go through the date, how do you evaluate that? How are they treating you? How are you treating them? How are you interacting? So that's where it all came from.
Okay. Well, let's take it from the beginning. Meeting somebody.
Well, first of all, what are you looking for? The thing that people, if you look at their lives, they spend more time looking for what kind of car they're going to drive, or what sofa they're going to sit on, or what big screen TV than they do of where they're going to spend 8 to 10 hours a day. And what people, if you look at, I joke about this, but happy hour was invented because people go there to complain about they hate their job, they hate their boss, they hate their company. Well, it's the same thing when we spend 8 to 10 hours a day with our work, but we spend very little time with our spouse. But it's very important to us. Values, environment, location, all of these things are factors when people are starting their job search. Who am I looking for? Yes, they're unemployed or want to be employed. The employer has a need. But just because it's just like with Match.com or something else, or going to a singles bar, just because somebody is single and they're single, the company being the analogy, doesn't mean there's compatibility. So what you have to do is you start your whole concept of what are you looking for? What is the environment? I was a big fan of Elizabeth Taylor, and I would love to have been her seventh husband, but no, that wasn't going to happen because I wasn't going to take that chance of being number 8 or 7. People that look at an employer and go, oh, why are you interested in them? Oh, they have great benefits. Okay, well, how far are they from your home? Well, they're about 40 miles from my home. So that means you're like an 80-mile round trip. Okay, it's like a long-range marriage or relationship, dating somebody that lives in there. What is their environment like? What's their turnover like? Oh, well, they hire a lot and they lay off. why do you want to get involved in a relationship that you know is not going to succeed? And so from an employer standpoint and an employee standpoint, you're trying to find a match of what are your values? What's important to you? And one of the things that I always trained recruiters on is you recruit for values first. If an organization is not compatible with you, so how do you go about looking for them? Is the next question. Well, the best way that if you ask most people how they met their spouse through an introduction. They met their spouse through a consistent, either through church or through an activity that they have interest in, whether it's music or sports or whatever it would be, that there's initially a compatibility. And as they started seeing those people, then they show an interest. Obviously, appearance is one of the first things. But as we all know in employment and in real life, beauty's only skin deep.
Yeah, but what you're describing there sounds suspiciously like networking.
Oh gosh, yes. It's networking to a very intimate level. In that you're not going to a large event and just, well, that's like going to a singles bar. Is going to a networking event and hoping to God you find somebody. Now, what happens at those networking events sometimes is that you end up leaving feeling worse about it was like the old 70s. Friday night was singles night, Saturday night was couples night. So Friday night you put on your best polyester, and you go to the singles bar and you show up, and basically you're saying, here I am, who wants me? At the end of the evening, if you haven't made a connection, you feel worse about yourself as a person. Nobody wants me. What's wrong with me? It's the same thing in employment. People are going to networking events. They're putting their information out on the internet, and they're not hearing back anything. And they're going, after a while, it's like, are you actually networking in the right way? Are you focusing on the right people or the right organization? So in that way, from a compatibility with the courtship process and the job search process, it's the same thing. Take your time. Know who you're looking for. Know an organization whose values are the same as yours. If you're a very customer-focused person and you're interested in a company, go to the Better Business Bureau, look them up, see how they're rated. If they're rated poorly, it's just like if you're interested in going out with somebody, talk to a friend. Talk to somebody who used to date them or was married to them. It's the same thing. But people don't think about it in those ways. And what I'm trying to get people to think about is, think about what you've done in your own life in a courtship standpoint, and apply it to the job search process.
Well, let's go back to that singles night on Friday.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're not successful, and you go home and you're saying to yourself, nobody wants me.
Right.
Wouldn't the better question be, why doesn't somebody want me?
Exactly. And how are you presenting yourself? Maybe you're not going to the right place. Maybe you're going to a place where you think people would be interested in you. If you're more spiritual and you're more involved with your religious organization, maybe you want to go to a family event or a singles event through your church. There's going to be somebody that shares that same compatibility with you. The employment process from the beginning all the way to termination is a marriage. It should be treated like a marriage. A lot of the employers don't do that. They don't see the value in that relationship. And again, I have to go back to people being happy with their lives. You spend 8 to 10 hours a day in that environment with those people. And as you start looking at the environment, go to the right places. Don't go to a place where you think, a job fair, for instance. They're wonderful activities. I don't downplay them at all. But if you're not interested in that organization, don't talk to them. It's not going to happen. Don't waste your time.
Just because they're there doesn't mean you have to get online to give your resume.
And here's the other thing, Hector, too. The People that are going online and are searching for job openings and are applying online in the job openings. Well, because you're single and they're single doesn't mean you're compatible. The other thing that you don't know is how desperate are they? The employer. They may have a high turnover rate and you may not know it. And they're desperate for you. And and as we get through the dating process, you'll be able to pick up some of those signals. But it's the same thing. Why apply online just because they have a job opening and you haven't done your research on the company? You don't know what they're like. You don't know how far away they are from your home. You don't know how that's going to help if you've got young children and you've got to take care of the daycare issues and other issues. Is that going to be compatible? And your value systems. The values are the most important thing. Do they treat their customers the way that you want to be treated? The old golden rule: treat other people as you want to be treated. The platinum rule that came out with Ken Blanchard: you treat other people as they want to be treated. How does your employer treat their employees? And as we go through the dating courtship process, there are going to be little signals when you go on the date, when you show up at the facility, that you'll be able to pick up on to see how compatible are you with them.
Mark, in dating, sometimes some of the best matches come when you have a friend who is the matchmaker.
Yes.
Would you say the same thing is true for the courtship process, for
most
a job
definitely.
search?
Most definitely. And there are some great tools out there that people have not really used in the job search process that can be of major value. And one of them is LinkedIn. It's like the business Facebook, if you will. But what LinkedIn allows you to do is look at people that currently work in that company or people that formerly worked in that company, and you can go to them and people that you may know who know, and you can see where your connections are and say, hey, Sarah, would you mind calling Hector? What do you know about XYZ company? Hector's worked at XYZ company. Or could you give me an introduction to Hector so I could find out about XYZ company? And it is, I met my wife through, 35 years ago, through an introduction. She was a summer student working in our office, and I was introduced by somebody else, and he basically set us up. And if you look at a lot of people, that's the way it works. You use your personal network, and it's not just a professional network, and it's not just going to a big social event and walking around and, again, going to a singles bar, hoping to God somebody falls in love with you, that night.
Because they know you, and they hopefully know the company, and they know the values of each one, too.
And it's funny when you start talking about it, people all smile because they can all relate to it. They visualize what happened to us.
Sure.
And so what happens is you talk to somebody and go, oh, I'm really interested in going out with her or him. And they go, no, you don't want to do that. No. Well, why not? Well, he's been married 3 times, and, he's got a bit of a little problem there. And, you're going to get the insights that show whether you're compatible or not. It's the same thing for the people that used to work there. Oh, they say their mission statement says, they say on their website this and this, but this is what it's like to work there. It's like being a galley slave, Mm-hmm. You're going to hear those kinds of stories real by going to the people who you know and using your network, personal network, trustworthy network. So that's where it starts.
That's where it starts. And then let's get to something that I know is a hot button for you.
What is that?
That's the resume.
Okay. The most overrated document in the world. Resumes are like telling somebody you want to go out with how many bad relationships you've been in. Would you want to tell somebody how many bad relationships you've been in and what you did in those relationships? That's not why people are interested in you. That's not why they want to go on a date with you. Why they want to go on a date with you is you have something to offer them. And when it comes to letting an employer know what you have to offer them, a resume, in the way it's been educated to people by HR people, and having been a former, I can get away with saying this, they're the enemy. To people looking for a job, they're the enemy. They want to disqualify you. They don't necessarily want to qualify you. And an employer, and I believe in a qualification summary. where you're identifying your areas of effectiveness and what you have to offer an employer. So what do you tell somebody when you want to go on a date? Do you tell them, again, how many failed relationships you've been in? You don't get them your shoe size. You don't, and you know, last thing, you don't tell them how much money you have in the bank, because that may drive it in a different direction. So what you do is you tell them why they want to go out with you, why they should be interested in you. And the qualification summary, unlike the resume, does the same thing. I'm really good at I'm not people skills. I'm really good at customer service. And with that qualification summary, you give them a little paragraph and you give them accomplishments, not what you did. It's people are interested in other people based upon the way they really are, not just that they showed up. And people that show up and put what their responsibilities doesn't say why you are more valuable to that employer than anybody else. I heard an analogy a number of years ago. If you took all of the presidents of the United States and had them put a resume together, and you were going to select one of them to lead a new country that you're starting, forget the dates, this is hypothetical. Mm-hmm. Who would you hire? Well, if you were interested in domestic policy or foreign policy, if you went by a standard resume, you wouldn't know who to hire. You'd have to interview every one of them because their resume said the same thing. This is what their responsibilities were. It's what did you accomplish? You can use a standard resume in some cases. The other thing is the way that many corporations, and I speak to employers here as much as I speak to potential employees, is you've got to think about what are you wanting to accomplish? You're wanting everybody to fill stuff out online. You know, what is it you want to accomplish? Well, it's easier. It saves time. You know, when I was at Marion Labs and I had 10 full-time recruiters, we were getting 25,000 resumes a month. Every one of them was reviewed. Every person was responded to. And from an employer standpoint, you've got to be an employer of choice. And a lot of employers aren't looking at today, and I'm getting off on a tangent here, but if they're looking at demographics, there's going to be a serious supply and demand problem in the next few years of talent. You know, and so you better be an employer of choice, and that means the way you treat people as we get into the dating process, the way you treat people will have an indication of how, if you treat people poorly, you'll get poor people. If you treat people with respect and dignity, they will be attracted to you. You'll become an employer of choice. But to get back to the qualification summary is what you want. Even if you have to put a standard resume together, you put on there what you've accomplished, not what you did.
So it shows what the two of you have in common then.
Exactly. That's what this is.
You're looking for this is what I have.
This is compatibility. You know, you look at the job description and you go, oh, I've done that. I've done that. And you know what? I was good at that. And let me tell you how I was good at that. And then when you get into the date, you can get into the details. And that's exactly what they want to hear. You know, it's not again, I go back to it, and I'm obviously, you've heard me about this before. I'm very passionate about this. It's not a game. This is life. This is you don't look at a courtship as a game. So if you mentally treat it the same way, you'll I don't want to say you'll take it more seriously, but it'll be more value to you, and you'll be more empowered that it's your life that you're looking to affect.
Especially if you're looking at it as a long-term relationship.
Look, you know, there are people that are lonely and will go out with anybody just to stop being lonely. And I use this analogy that you know, we all have to pay our bills and we have to take care of our families, et cetera. So some people will take any job they can temporarily or to take care of those needs. I've done it.
Yes, survivor job.
It's a survivor job, but it's not a long-term relationship. There are history from an employer standpoint. Employers are looking for people that haven't been in a long-term relationship either. So to say you want to just have a qualification summary without listing your former employer, but that can come out in the date. You see, the resume gets the date. The qualification summary gets the date. People seem to think you're going to get hired with this document. That's not the way it is. All it does, your whole focus is to, one, get the introduction, and number two, get the date, and then see where it goes from there.
And prepare for the date. I mean, you in the courtship, when you first meet somebody, you're going to be very careful about what you wear and how you smell and everything.
Where you're going.
Right, where you're going. So the preparation is just as important.
It is. And when we get into the details of how do you prepare for the date, but one of the most important things that people, and again, it's a gamesmanship, that you read all these books and you hear all these people talk about looking for a job, and they talk about the questions, the gaming questions. Mm-hmm. You don't do that on a date. You don't go into the date thinking about, okay, if I ask this question, what does this mean? How do I because eventually it's going to come out on a date. Are you compatible or you're not compatible? What I ask people to do as they look at getting prepared for the date is to reassess their history, their work history. What am I good at? What are my real areas of effectiveness? And to think back of those specific situations where you were accomplished. So as we talk in the next section about the actual date, then I'll kind of share a little bit more in detail about how to do it. But you got to prepare for the date. And one of the other things in preparing for the date is where are you going and how do you look? How do you dress? And people said, well, how do you get ready for a date? You'll want to find out where you're going. If you're going to a higher-end restaurant, do they require, is there a certain dress code? Do you want to overdress? You don't want to underdress? Mm-hmm. So I tell people, you want to find out how people dress at the company? 2 days before your interview or a day before, go out there during lunch hour and see how people dress. Just don't be a stalker. But I mean, you just head out, or in the morning or afternoon.
How do they look when they're coming in?
And you look how they come in and they go out, Yeah. You don't want to overdress. Many organizations that once you're employed there, many software companies that tend to be a little bit more casual these days. And there are people wearing cargo shorts. Well, you're not necessarily going to wear cargo shorts, but you're not going to wear a suit either. These are the kind of things that you should prepare for and know about, and know where you're going. And don't rely, and forgive me, Garmin, for saying this because they're a wonderful supporter of Habitat. You got to know where you're going and don't always rely on a GPS. Yep. You may end up at the wrong place at the wrong...
Even before you can program the GPS, you have to know what to program it for.
But the
practice
thing,
the route.
And don't be afraid to when you get the interview set up and you're talking to somebody on the phone, and hopefully you'll talk to somebody on the phone, is to say, where's the best place to park? Do you have a more an acceptable route for traffic? You're also going to get something out of that. Believe it or not, it's every little thing that happens in this courtship process. Okay. You're going to know how they treat you on the phone. If they're saying, oh, yeah, I had the same problem. Oh, yeah. If they're showing some interest in you, you're getting a signal from them that they care about a potential worker, a future coworker. So there's the little things, the little subtle things during the courtship process that when you're talking to somebody about, well, I'm going to pick you up at 7 o'clock. What's the best way to get to you? Is there a place to park? You're going to hear from that person if they show some interest in you. So,
well, we will get a little more into the dating in another podcast. But thank you so much for courting us today.
Yeah.
And if somebody wanted to reach you to get more information or have you speak at one of their events, where could they reach you?
Best way to reach me is they can call my mobile phone at 913-302-7892. It's my personal mobile phone. Or at they can actually get in touch with me through Heartland Habitat at Mark, M-A-R-K, at heartlandhabitat.org. I've got access to that 24/7, and I actually do respond to every email in a timely fashion.
Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
You can hear more advice and information from Mark and other past guests by listening to other job chats on our website at www.newlandingsjobchat.org or just search for Job Chat on YouTube. Thanks again for being here, Mark.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Mark. And until next time, may your days be full of health, happiness, and success.